Hi, everybody. Coach Kyle here again with another video about anxiety. And today we're going to talk specifically about thoughts and the role that they play in escalation of anxiety or de-escalation of anxiety. So as we talked in previous videos, anxiety kind of has three main components: activation of the nervous system, an emotional response, and thoughts. And I often frame this whole process of thoughts as the process of anxiety is driven primarily by the more primitive part of the brain. In the brain stem, it's also controlling all the automatic stuff happening in our body without our conscious awareness. And it's really tasked with keeping us alive, keeping us safe. But thoughts are this part of the brain's way of consulting with accessing information in the higher thinking analytical mind that has this whole library of information from learning and past experiences and everything we've been exposed to, read about, been told, thought about in the past. So this part, the more primitive part of the brain's way of accessing that information with the intent of taking a perceived threat, injecting thoughts into the thinking mind, and having either verification that, yes, this is a threat. And if so, how threatening is it? Or no, this is not really a threat and we're okay. We can diffuse the whole process of anxiety. So essentially, to put it in simple terms, our our protective brain perceives a potential threat, does what we talked about in previous videos. It injects a thought or many thoughts into our conscious mind. And based on how we engage with those thoughts, are either going to verify that, yes, there's a real threat here and we need to do something or get out of there, or no, this is actually not a big deal. We're okay right now. So, um, I also want to make the point that these thoughts, often called worry thoughts or similar, um, they're normal. They're always going to happen in conjunction with anxiety because they're part of the anxiety process and they're an important part. Um, but we can find ourselves stuck in patterns of how we engage with these thoughts that get us into places, into situations where anxiety is overwhelming, where anxiety is there when it shouldn't be. And also, much of the emotional experience we feel, what we feel with anxiety, is determined by this engagement or non-engagement with thoughts as well. There's going to be an initial kind of emotional response that's happening automatically, um, but oftentimes how we feel when we're feeling anxious is more determined by our continued engagement or non-engagement with the thoughts that are coming into our mind because of anxiety. So we can really change the way anxiety feels for us by changing the way we engage with these thoughts. But again, we can't stop them. We can't make these thoughts go away, but we can change how we engage with them, how that affects us. So let's talk about what we can do. Okay. So the first step, no matter which route we take, there's a couple of different routes. The first step is always awareness, noticing what thoughts are there. All right. So go to those situations that spark anxiety for you and notice, take notice of what thoughts are coming to your mind. Are there patterns? Are there certain thoughts that are always there? And we just want to notice and be aware of that. Okay. And then we can go a couple different ways with this. One common route is often referred to as CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy, as it's often called in therapy settings. This is essentially engaging with these thoughts in a way that we're, again, noticing them, and then we're challenging them. Is this thought accurate? Is this truthful? So, coming up with a scenario, let's say I was invited to a social gathering and I have an anxiety thought of something like, oh, they only invited me to be nice. They don't really want me there. So with this thought, I can engage it through a CBT approach of trying to use logic and reasoning that no, that thought's not true. I could go down the road of like, no, I know these people. We've been friends for many, many years since we were little kids. That's not true. They wouldn't do that. So I can debunk that thought, say this thought's not truthful. And that tells my protective brain that, okay, this potential threat situation of a social event is not a real threat. So I'm debunking that and I'm going to de escalate and eventually turn off the anxiety process as a result of continued engagement with this thought in that way. However, there are situations where this approach doesn't seem to work well. And that's going to vary person to person and even situation to situation. So, what can happen sometimes is we find ourselves dealing with an anxiety thought that's often through learning and repeated exposure to these anxiety inducing situations where that thought is so persistent, it's so pervasive and so strong that to engage with it in this way, we just find ourselves like constantly arguing with this thought. Like we challenge it with reason and logic, but it comes right back. And then it comes right back. And then it comes right back. And that can be really frustrating. It can be really exhausting. And when we're engaging with thoughts in this way, we're kind of reinforcing to our protective brain that, yeah, this thought's dangerous. We're maybe even sending the message to our protective brain that thought itself is now a threat because it's affecting us in this way and we're engaging with it in this way. So there is another approach that's in therapy settings often called ACT or acceptance and commitment therapy. So this is, again, noticing our thoughts. What thoughts are coming up? When are they coming up? Are there patterns to these? But instead of challenging that thought, we're just going to notice it and then kind of separate ourselves from it. Give some distance between me and that thought. So we're going to acknowledge that the thought's there. We're going to, in some ways, accept and welcome its presence, but we're not going to engage with it. We're just going to go, there's a thought. It's a worry thought. It's an anxiety thought. And I'm not going to engage with it. I'm just going to let it go. And every time it comes up or another new thought comes in, same thing. Notice it, acknowledge it, disengage from it. So by disengaging from it, by not engaging with it in a negative way, we're sending our protective brain the message that, okay, that's not a thought we're concerned with because I'm not getting worried about it. I'm not engaging with it in that way. So that's going to de-escalate the anxiety cycle. And I think when we talked earlier in earlier videos about the willingness to sit with just the experience of anxiety as a whole, that's really the approach we were talking about there. Just having the willingness to sit with it, be present with it, acknowledge it, but give some distance between us and it and disengage from it in some ways. Not avoiding it. That's different. We're not saying avoid these thoughts by distracting ourselves from them or trying to do some other behavior to avoid these thoughts. But we want to be present with it, but not engaged with it. It might sound similar, but it's very different in how our brain's going to see that. So we could use the analogy here of, you're walking down the street in a busy place, like a big tourist area. We've all probably been there at some point in our lives, and you have people coming up to you, people stopping you, people trying to sell you things, trying to tell you things, trying to get you to go somewhere, visit this place, that place, whatever. And we could use these two different approaches in the same way here. We could engage with these people and tell them, explain to them, no, I don't want what you're selling. I don't have the money. I don't want to spend the money. I don't need that. I don't want that. But you can imagine there are going to be those individuals who are extra persistent, extra pushy, and engaging it with them in any way like that is going to be problematic. You're not going to be able to walk away if you're engaging with them. So the best approach for people or thoughts like that is just to acknowledge them, smile and wave and say, no, thank you, and keep walking. Don't engage, right? So I think that's a perfect example of how this looks with thoughts in a real life scenario that I think we can all relate with. Um, but again, put this very simply, how we engage with these thoughts is going to determine how long anxiety persists, our experience of anxiety, how that feels, that emotional response is much and is by and large determined by how we engage with these thoughts. And we can either escalate anxiety or de-escalate anxiety. And always keep in mind, our brain is learning every time we do this. So if we consistently engage with these thoughts in a way that de-escalates anxiety, it's going to learn that process, and it's going to happen much faster, much easier, and that initial anxiety response is going to be diminished over time. And it's going to be easier to engage with our thoughts or not engage with them in this way, the more we practice it as well. But I don't want to make the mistake of making this sound easy, because it's not. It's simple in concept, but it's very difficult. It can be very, very difficult in practice. And like anything where we're teaching our brain, we're literally rewiring our brains through neuroplasticity. It takes time and it takes effort, and we can't get around that. There's no way around that. That's just always what it takes to rewire our brains in this way. But with that effort, with that consistent practice, you can get yourselves out of anxiety. We can help better deal with these worry thoughts that come with anxiety, and drive this whole process in a way that's much better for our quality of life and is going to be much more helpful for us when we're actually in danger, and when anxiety comes up when we're not in danger. So I hope you found this helpful. Um, and we might get into some specific practices in upcoming videos. I haven't decided yet, but stay tuned for the next video on anxiety or wherever we go next, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.